Ojani, Tanzania, Segos, Kanagawa. My pleasure. I'm very happy to be here and to be involved in this webinar. And I want to thank you, Sabina and Valerie, for inviting me. What I wanted to talk about was compassion and forgiveness, and how important that is in all our relationships, in building a relationship. And I want to begin by compassion. Yeah, the importance of compassion. And compassion is, I want to share a quote with you from one of my students, and I think it's a beautiful quote. She's talking about restorative justice. And she said, restorative justice is based on the understanding of compassion, that no one is alone in society, treating every individual as an equal member of the community. This means to me that everyone has an equal chance to contribute to the greater good of a community. That's by one of my students, Emma Kerr. But I wanted to continue the compassion and what does it entail. And it's about forgiveness. That's the one thing I want to talk about was forgiveness. And as Elder Augustine talked about, about living together peacefully, living together in a good way. And in my language, forgiveness, we say abiksik duahan. But what that means is to bring back the relationship to its pristine state, to its original state. It's about bringing back that relationship. And it began this journey. Well, my grandparents, they've always taught me about forgiveness, and we always talked about it. But this particular journey where forgiveness made such an impact in my life began with the death of my husband. He was murdered in our community in 1996. And when he died, I hadn't been with him because of alcohol and drug abuse, and I didn't want to bring up my children in that environment. But we hadn't divorced. I still loved him very much, and I was hoping that. And I told him that if you find sobriety, we'll get back together. And he would for a little while, but he'd always go back to that. Anyway, when he died, our youngest daughters were 3 and 5. They were just babies when he passed away. And he and the day it happened, it was on a Friday afternoon. And I remember my mom coming into the house, my mother and my aunt, and the women in my family, my sister-in-law, they all came in and sat down at the kitchen table, but nobody said anything. I didn't know anything at the time. And my cousin came in, and when she came in, she said, Jane, she said, I'm so sorry. I have bad news for you. And she told me what had happened. She said there was a murder down the road, and they think it's your husband. They think your husband was killed. And I just started crying. I was so grateful my mother and the women in my family were there. When later I spoke to my mother and asked her, I said, I'm so glad you were there when that happened. She said, we knew about it. She said, I didn't know how to tell you. And anyway, so, after that I remember telling my daughters, and I remember excusing myself and saying I had to go upstairs to my room. And I went to my room and I prayed. And I prayed for help. I didn't know how to deal with it. I felt anger. I felt hurt. Um, and I didn't know what to do. And so as I was praying, a grandmother came to visit me. She came to see me and she talked about forgiveness. And I asked her, she said, she said, I need to tell you things. She said, in this life, she said, it's always about free choice. It's always about free will. And she said, I want you to understand that forgiveness is important. But she said, yet it's up to you to forgive. Um, she said, you always have a choice. You can choose to forgive or you can choose not to forgive. But she said, I'll tell you what will happen. If you choose not to forgive, if you choose to forgive, she said, your children will grow up healthy and happy and enjoy life, and um, they'll be empowered. Should you choose not to forgive, what you will do is your children will become angry, bitter adults, always looking for revenge and looking to even the score. She said, it is ultimately it's your choice, but she said, I will tell you this. This man may have taken your children's father's life, but you have the ability and the power to destroy their lives. It's up to you. And I thought about it and I said, I remember my grandmother always talking about forgiveness and how important it was and um, how it brought peace within you. Because when our people are in the hospital and they're dying, I remember my grandmother always asking my family members, did you go and forgive? Did you go do a forgiveness ceremony while they're in the hospital? Because our people believe that it is important that you ask for forgiveness of that human being that is dying, but that you also give forgiveness so that they don't carry that burden into the spirit world, that you lighten their burden as they go into the spirit world. And so I remember my grandmother always asking that. Would you and and then we also have ceremonies around forgiveness. We have forgiveness ceremonies. Now they do it at New Year and the New Year, but it used to be done around the winter solstice, and it would be done different times of the year, probably in the also in the summer, and people would come and they'd all renew that relationship and renew their friendship with each other. Anyway, the after this, I went to the other family. I went to the house where my husband was killed, and I went to the house next door. My friend was in the house next door, and my friend it was her brother who did this, and I went in to see her. We also have a close relationship. Not only was she my friend, but she was a godmother to one of my daughters. And I went in and she looked at me. I went into the house next door and she looked at me and I opened my arms and she came over and she cried on my shoulders and we cried together. And and that was um, I guess it was empowering for both of us, you know, and we we were also later in the day, later in the I think probably the following night, I called um, this man's brother-in-law, the man who killed my husband. I called his brother-in-law and I asked him, I said, how's your family doing? How are your wife, you know, and your in-laws? He said, they're not doing well. They're falling apart. They're having a very difficult time. So I asked him, I said, do you think they would mind if my mother-in-law and I came over there and prayed with them? Do you think it would be okay? And he said, please do that. I think it would be so helpful to them in dealing with what's going on because they're hurting so much. So my mother-in-law and I went over there and we prayed with them, and of course we shared tea with them and talked for a while. But it just seemed like there was so much that was going on. But I took a lot of um, direction from spirit and from my children, and and so the house, the lady that I was talking about, she wanted to clean the house. I said, don't do that because I know you're just trying to do it uh, as a way of repenting. I said, don't do that. Don't do that. So I asked the band council if they would board up the house after the police tape came down, and if they wouldn't mind. And I said, you know, if I have to, I'll pay. I'll pay for professional cleaners to go in there. And they said, no, it's okay. We'll take care of that. So they were very good about it. Because I didn't want anybody going in there and telling my daughters later, you know, how sometimes people are kind of, I don't know what it is, if they like the gruesome details or whatever, but I didn't want anyone telling my daughters later, here's where the blood was, here's what happened, here's how it looked. And so they were very accommodating. They boarded up the house and they asked professional cleaners to come in, people who did not know my husband or any either family. So they were really good about it. And a couple of days later, we got together with the family and we prayed and we smudged the house. Um, I follow our traditional ways, but the other family followed Roman Catholicism. So we had both. We had the priest come in and bless the house with his like holy water and prayers, and some of the elders doing the rosary, and then we did our smudging and our traditional prayers and offering of tobacco and 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 song, like we did healing songs, and and it, and then the other family had tea and sweets ready for the community. And I was very fortunate that there were elders from every part of our community that came and participated along with different families, you know, and so it was a lot of healing for all of us at the time. And then I was talking to my daughters, um, and I told them, I asked them, I said, there's a little girl I need to tell you about. I said, she's 7, 8 years old. They were just 3 and 5. And I told them, this little girl is having a really difficult time in school. The kids are making fun of her. Um, they're making things very difficult for her. And they're telling her that you're no good. Your father's a murderer. Um, and you're not going to amount to anything. And anyway, so I told my daughters about her. I said, what do you think we should do? And my 3-year-old said, you know what? No, my 5-year-old said, you know what, Mom, we should go visit her. Let's go see her and make sure she's all right and let her know we care. I said, okay. And my 3-year-old said, and we should bring gifts. Let's bring gifts to her. I said, okay. So we went. I called the mother, and the mother said, yes, please. She's having a hard time. We, she would love to see you guys. So we went to the we went to the flower shop just down the road, and my 5-year-old came in with me, and she picked out this little stuffed teddy bear with wings, little gold wings, and a little halo on his head, and then she picked out a gift for her godmother, and then my 3-year-old was in the car with my mother, and the students that walk by and buy, um, they're selling chocolate. Well, she asked my mother to buy a chocolate bar, so my mother did. She bought the little box of chocolates, and so we went to the home. We had our gifts, and my oldest daughter was with me. Well, she's probably 18 or 19 at the time. Anyway, she came with me, and when we came in, the mother greeted us. She was happy to see us. She said, my daughter will be in a few minutes. She's with a friend right now, but she knows you're coming, and she knows who you are. Because one of the things I prayed about was, how do we approach this? Creator, I don't know how to say this without hurting this little girl again, without causing more um, damage, I guess. But it needs to be acknowledged. We can't hide from it, and we can't pretend it didn't happen. So she finally came in, she hugged my daughters, and they gave her these gifts. And as in many Native homes, a lot of times you have your coffee table. Many natives will identify with this. Your coffee table's not usually in front of the couch. Your coffee table is in front of that big picture window. And the kids sat there. She sat in the center, and my daughters, each of them sat on either side of her. And she opened up the chocolate. They were sharing the chocolate, and they were all talking. And I was watching them. The other mother and my daughter and I were sitting and watching them. We're sitting at the kitchen table, like the dining room table, and you can see into the living room. And my 3-year-old, she said, you killed your father killed our dad, didn't he? Your dad killed our dad. And she nodded her head. She said, yeah, he did. And then my 3-year-old said, where's your dad now? And she said, he's in jail. And then they both, I always get emotional about this part. They both leaned into her. And my 3-year-old told her, we know you love your dad just as much as we loved ours. Of course, tears came gushing. And I just found that to be so emotional. And I sat there and I said, thank you, Creator. It was acknowledged, it was said, and it wasn't done in a spiteful or mean or accusatory way. Thank God for those children, because they're just so wise and so beautiful. No, and it strengthened that relationship with my daughters. Um, the the Today she's still very close to my daughters. She's very they're, I guess, best friends. She's good friends with my daughter, and she remembers all that. And I remember one of this man's nieces once asking me, telling me, she said, I remember I was about 13, 14 years old when you came to my house after my uncle killed your husband, she said, and you came in to that room and you brought forgiveness and love. She said that was the biggest lesson in my life, and especially at that age. I I learned so much from your visit that day, coming to visit my mother and her family. And I think we need to pray together. We need to pray with our ancestors and our families and our children, and we need to teach them about the power of forgiveness, and that forgiveness is not always for the forgiven, but more for the forgiver, you know. And I think in this time too, and the things that we have done as human beings and the mistakes we made, it is vital that we forgive ourselves. And once we can forgive ourselves and forgive, you know, then we can build a really good relationship. We can build lasting friendships. We can build that relationship of family, as Elder Augustine said, with our brothers and our sisters. And it doesn't matter what nation they are from, but that we build that strong relationship, the strong bonds, with strong bonds of love. And I want to thank each and every one of you. Miigwech and Yawa Walalio. And I love all of you. Thank you.